Christian, after the fearsome fight with Apollyon, when he might have died of his wounds, had found healing under the tree of life. But it was only a brief respite. For as he continued on his journey, he now had to enter the darkest valley he had yet encountered, a very lonely place, where there was no water. No one ever lived there, and its silence was the silence of the grave. Here, Christian was to be more sternly tested than even in his fight with Apollyon. It all started when two men suddenly ran out from behind some trees, shouting, "Back! Go back!" "Why? What's the matter?" asked Christian. "Matter?" said they. "Why, the valley itself, it's as black as pitch down there, and the only sound is the howling of the damned, who, having entered there, have never been able to find their way out. In a word, it's every whit dreadful and utterly without order. For, we'd have you know, this is none other than the valley of the shadow of death." "But," said Christian, "there is no other way to the celestial city." "It's not the way we're going," they said. "Quick, go on! On! And they ran on, past Christian, waving their arms in terror. Christian, notwithstanding, went forward, sword in hand, feeling his way step by step, for the path was exceedingly narrow. On the right there lay a very deep ditch, into which many had fallen in all ages and perished miserably. On the left there lay a marsh so dangerous that even a good man, if he was sucked in, was never seen again, for he could find no bottom for his foot to stand on. And it was all so dark that when Christian tried to avoid the marsh, he almost fell headlong into the ditch, and he never knew whether his next step might not be his last. Then he saw ahead of him the light of a fire burning, and for a moment, as one does in dreams, he thought the worst was over. Some light to see by! This is better! But he was utterly mistaken. For what he had seen was the very mouth of hell itself, out of which were belching clouds of evil-smelling smoke, which added to the darkness all around. And the air was full of doleful voices, and the rush of wings. Apparitions against which his trusty sword, with which he had put to flight Apollyon, was of no avail, for they cared not for his sword. And sometimes they brushed against him with such force that he feared they would push him off the path, and he would drop into the depth of hell and be lost forever. These rushings to and fro were heard by him for several miles together, till he could go no further and dearly wanted to go back. But then he thought, by now he may be halfway through the valley, and the danger of going back may be as great as the danger of going forward. So he resolved to go on, and he shouted into the darkness with a vehement voice, I will walk in the strength of the Lord God. And for a while, silence fell about him once again. But not for long. For now, one of the wicked ones came up behind him and started whispering many base suggestions in his ear. Why don't you? And Christian became so confused, he thought it was his own voice. And he neither knew who he was or where he was. And this grieved poor Christian more than anything he had met with before. And he might easily have fallen on his sword and put an end to his misery. At that moment, he thought he heard the voice of a man going before him, saying, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." Immediately, Christian took courage, and for 3 reasons. 1, he gathered from this that there were others who feared God in the valley beside himself. 2, he perceived that God was with them, and if with them, why not with him? 3, he hoped to overtake them and have their company. Moreover, day was dawning, and he could look back. And by the light of day, he saw those hobgoblins and dragons of the pit which had brushed against him in the dark, but all afar off, for after daybreak they dare not come near.